Today, we're going to be looking at the Cheat Engine EA. This bot is from a fairly infamous developer, Mr. Connor Michael Woodson, who comes out with pretty similar bots fairly frequently. So I'm curious to dive into this one and see how exactly it works. So the issue with this guy's bots is that although some of them might have a real strategy behind them, the backtests are always so ridiculously fake that it's extremely hard to ascertain if there's anything real going on. So I wanted to just dive in to see if perhaps there's something kind of hidden beneath the fluff here, similar to some of the ones done by some other developers in the MQL5 marketplace who, although they use a real strategy, they tend to make the backtests a bit too rosy just to make it easier to sell. So let's now dive into this guy's sales page and see what's going on. So he's claiming that it indeed uses a API to gauge global Forex sentiment, and he's pulling so from Forex Factory pretty much to gauge what the sentiment of a certain pair would be. And that's actually a pretty smart idea. I'd be curious if you could actually backtest that though, because oftentimes like sentiment is hard to backtest. So you can backtest news, for instance. You can backtest sentiment through, for instance, options data or through COT reports, which is what we do, and that actually works really well. But trying to pull kind of a wisdom of the crowd metric from MyFX, you would need to know if they give you any historical data there, or else that's pretty useless, right? Because if you can't backtest something, the crowds can also be very wrong. Depending on like who the information is coming from or who they're surveying, that can make a bit of a difference. So what he's saying is that essentially the global Forex sentiment is looking at all trading positions and is based on that. That's actually neat. Like, for instance, we use COT reports, which looks at positioning of large funds, etc., to ascertain if there's a bias in the market. However, this only works if you can separate out who's actually taking the positions. So, like, for instance, with COT, you can isolate between institutional, commercial, and retail. Retail is usually wrong. So if you try and do the same trades as retail, fundamentally it's not going to be all that helpful. Whereas here, if you look at, I don't know, global Forex positions on a certain pair, you'd have to ascertain who's actually making the positions. Because let's say some people are doing it for hedging, they might actually be going in the opposite direction of where they think the price is going to go. You really need to kind of understand the data and understand like what it represents to be able to do this properly. And I'm a little bit skeptical that he's actually doing that here. He might just be saying like, okay, if MyFX says it's bullish, we're bullish, and vice versa for euro dollar, etc., whatever, right? And he'd need to actually be able to test that to see if there is a real statistical relationship there. I've done this many times. It can work really well, but you need to have a bit more data to be able to do that. So apart from that, we actually have no idea how this thing works. The reviews so far are a little bit rough. There's a few good ones, a few bad ones. Yeah, unfortunately, you got to be a little bit careful. So if we keep going through, it looks a little bit like straight line equity curves to me, which is also not a great sign. I think he's saying that here we're turning $1,000 to $313,000 with a 1% drawdown, a 95% win rate, and a 2-to-1 risk reward, probably 97% win rate, pardon me. So yeah, this is obviously a fake backtest. It looks way too good to be true. If we now pull up Vantage, you can see I did the same thing. I ran a backtest and it turned 10 grand into 415 grand over the span of a year. And yeah, it's just kind of trading. It looks to be mostly breakout based. Some are like more mean aversion with the general trend. There's nothing really going on here. He is giving you the ability to actually log into MyFX, which is pretty cool. If it actually works, that would be really interesting. But the fact that like the backtest looks this good without, just move my head, without any sort of sentiment filter, which is meant to be the underlying strategy, that's not a great sign, right? Because like if you were missing, like for instance, if you backtest an AI bot, you'll usually see that like its performance in the backtest is kind of nyeh, but the live performance is fantastic because you can actually use the AI. If he's claiming that sentiment analysis is the big driver here, and the backtest is still magical even without sentiment analysis, probably not a good sign. So yeah, honestly, we have no live signal. The backtest is clearly completely fake. The actual trades, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It looks to kind of be pretty much cherry-picked, either a history reader or heavy over optimization. It's a final step here. We can just run a visual backtest, but we can keep this video probably pretty short because I doubt there's anything of value here. And yeah, there's nothing really here. It's a nice, pretty chart, but oh look, we're even doing a mean aversion trade. So, or I guess that was more of a breakout because it would have been a buy. Oh no, it would have been a sell. It would have been a mean aversion trade. Look at that. So yeah, guys, this bot clearly pretty fake in my opinion. There's no real reason as to why one should buy this. There's plenty of other good gold bots in the marketplace which have real strategies. As my general rule of thumb, if you can't know why something works, and if it's clearly was way too good to be true, you probably should give your money to a more reputable developer. So guys, I'll see you in the next video, and yeah, take care.